Okay, so I need to tell you something that happened to me 2 nights ago because it is directly connected to why I am sitting here making this video right now. And I feel like if I do not give you the full context first, this reading is not going to land the way it deserves to. 2 nights ago, I was exhausted. Like genuinely bone deep, running on empty, exhausted in a way that had been building for days. I had been pushing myself too hard, not sleeping properly, skipping meals because I kept telling myself I would eat after finishing one more thing, and then one more thing kept becoming another thing. You know how that goes. You know exactly how that goes. And by 10 o'clock that night, I was just done. I turned everything off. I did not want to look at my phone. I did not want to think about content or schedules or anything that required me to be functioning at full capacity. I just wanted to lie there. And I was almost asleep, like that specific kind of almost asleep where your thoughts start getting strange and disconnected, and you are halfway between here and somewhere else when something pulled me back. Not a noise, not a notification, just this pull. This very specific, very insistent internal tug that I have learned over time to take seriously because it never comes for nothing. It always means something needs to come through. So I sat up. I actually said out loud, "Okay, fine." I said it out loud to my empty room like a person who has fully given up on seeming normal. "Okay, fine. What is it?" And then I got my cards from the bedside table where I keep them because I have learned that Spirit does not care about my sleep schedule, apparently. And I started shuffling in the dark. Literally in the dark, because I did not even turn a light on. Just me sitting up in my bed in the dark, shuffling my cards and waiting. And what started coming through stopped me completely. Because it was not abstract. It was not the kind of general energy that sometimes comes through in the middle of the night when your defenses are down and everything feels a little more open. This was specific. This was urgent. This was, there is a person, there is a situation, there was a conversation that happened, and someone needs to know what happened in that conversation, and they need to know it now. I turned the lamp on. I got my notebook from the drawer, and I sat there for the next hour and a half, writing down everything Spirit was showing me. And at some point, I think it was maybe midnight, maybe a little after I put my pen down, and I just sat there for a second because what I had been shown was so specific and so loaded with this energy of loyalty and fierce protection and genuine disgust on the part of 3 particular people that I was genuinely moved by it. Not performing moved, actually moved. Like something in my chest shifted. And I thought, whoever this is for, they need to hear this. They need to hear it today. Not eventually. Today, so here I am, running on not quite enough sleep and more tea than is probably medically advisable, but here. Because this could not wait, and I think you are going to understand why the moment we get into it. But first, before anything else, I need you to do one thing. I need you to think about whether you have had this specific feeling recently. This very particular sensation of your name being in a room somewhere that you are not in. Not paranoia. I am not talking about anxiety or insecurity or the kind of spiral thinking that makes you feel like everyone is talking about you when they are not. I am talking about that other thing, that actual gut level knowing. The kind that feels like a slight physical heaviness sitting just below your sternum. The kind that makes you glance at your phone for no reason because some part of you is braced for something. The kind that makes ordinary conversations feel like they might have a subtext you are not being told about. If you have been having that feeling, if something has felt slightly off in a way you have not been able to articulate, then this reading is for you, and everything that comes next is going to explain exactly what that feeling was picking up on. Let us go. So the first thing Spirit showed me, and the foundation of this entire reading, is that something was said about you recently, within the last day or two, or perhaps right now as you are watching this, because Spirit does not always operate on a neat timeline. There was a conversation. It had an audience, more than one person present, more than one person listening to what was being said. And your name came up in that conversation in a way that was deliberate and calculated and designed to land in a very specific way in the minds of whoever was listening. Now I want to be precise about what I mean when I say calculated, because I think that word matters here. This was not someone venting about a frustration they have with you in a moment of genuine emotion. This was not someone saying something impulsive that they did not think through. This was constructed, thought about beforehand, shaped in a way that was intended to create a particular impression. The version of you that was presented in this conversation was not the real version. It was a edited, selective, strategically incomplete version that was specifically designed to make you look a certain way to the people in that room. And the person presenting it knew exactly what they were doing. What they said touched on your character, your intentions behind something you did or did not do. Some version of a story about you that has been significantly altered from what actually happened, either by removing context or by inserting their own interpretation of your motivations as though it were fact, or by emphasizing certain details while leaving out others that would change the picture entirely if they were included. And they told it with a confidence that suggested they were the authority, like they had the complete picture, and what they were sharing was simply the objective truth about who you are. And I want to pause here for a moment because I feel like some of you right now are already having a physical reaction to what I am describing. Your body already knows. Your gut already knew before I started this reading. And I want you to know that what your instincts have been telling you was not wrong. You were not being paranoid. You were not spiraling. You were picking up on something real. Type "I already knew" in the comments if this is landing as a confirmation of something you have been feeling. Because I think a lot of people watching this came here already carrying the weight of this, and I want to acknowledge that before we go any further. Now let me talk about these three people, because this is the actual heart of the reading, and Spirit was so extraordinarily specific about each of them that I want to take real time with each one individually rather than glossing over them, because they each matter. They each defended you in a different way from a different place. And together they form something that I think is going to be genuinely meaningful for you to hear. The first person who defended you is someone who has been in your life long enough to have a real picture of who you actually are. Not the version that gets filtered through someone else's agenda or someone else's feelings about you. The actual real picture built from actual real time spent with you or observing you across multiple situations and contexts. This person has watched you handle things that were difficult. They have seen you in moments when nobody was watching and when everything was watching. They have been present for enough of your life to know the difference between who you actually are and who someone is trying to present you as. When your name came up in that conversation and the narrative about you started being built, something happened in this person that was not subtle. It was not a quiet internal doubt about whether what was being said was accurate. It was immediate and it was physical, a tightening, a sharpening, a very clear internal signal that what they were hearing was fundamentally wrong, not just incomplete. Wrong, and this person is not the type to sit quietly when they hear something that is fundamentally wrong about someone they actually know. They spoke up. And when I say spoke up, I do not mean they offered a gentle alternative perspective or said, well, I have always found them to be fine in that measured diplomatic way that still leaves the door open for the narrative being built to maintain its footing. They said no. Directly, clearly, with a firmness that came from actually knowing you rather than just wanting to defend you out of loyalty. And then they backed it up. They offered specific things, specific situations, specific qualities, specific moments that contradicted what was being said in a way that was hard to argue with because it was grounded in real experience and real observation. The person doing the talking did not expect that. They had read the room wrong. They had gone in assuming the narrative would move through with minimal resistance. And the moment this first person pushed back with that kind of grounded, specific, I know this person energy, the entire conversation shifted. Something became uncomfortable because you cannot maintain a false narrative about someone in a room that contains someone with first-hand knowledge of what the real picture looks like. The false narrative cannot survive contact with people who actually know the truth. Drop a comment and type First Defender if you already have a sense of who this person might be for you. Because I think some of you are going to know immediately. The second person who defended you is different in a really interesting way, and I want to make sure I describe this correctly because the distinction matters. This is not someone who has extensive history with you. They have not been in your life for years. Their knowledge of you is more limited in terms of time and shared experience. And yet, when they heard what was being said, something in them rejected it just as clearly as the first person. Because this second person is genuinely observant. They pay attention in a way that not everyone does. And in whatever limited exposure they have had to you, they noticed something about your character that was enough to make the things being said feel immediately and obviously inconsistent with the person they observed. What they noticed, the specific quality that their limited observation picked up on, and that made the false narrative ring false for them, is your consistency. The way you show up the same way in different contexts. The way the version of you that exists in one setting matches the version of you that exists in another. The way your energy and your character do not seem to change based on who is watching or what the social incentive is in a given moment. That consistency is visible even in limited exposure to someone who is genuinely paying attention. And it is one of the most powerful things you can have working in your favor because it means that people do not need years of knowing you to arrive at an accurate read of who you are. The real picture presents itself relatively quickly to anyone actually looking. This second person did not make a big dramatic scene when they defended you. Their energy was different from the first person. Quieter, more measured, but no less firm. They said, that does not match the person I have observed. And they said it simply and directly, and then they offered the specific thing they had noticed that contradicted the narrative. And that kind of defense, calm, grounded, based on personal observation rather than passionate loyalty, carries a particular kind of credibility that is sometimes more powerful than louder defenses. It does not look like protecting someone out of affection. It looks like stating an honest, objective, personally verified fact. And that is very hard to dismiss or reframe. The third person. This is the one that genuinely got to me at midnight in my apartment when Spirit showed me this, and I just want to prepare you for this because it is the most unexpected part of the whole reading and also the most powerful. The third person who defended you, the one who was arguably the most fierce, the one whose defense landed with the most weight in that room, is someone who has had friction with you. Some kind of tension or distance or complicated history. Not necessarily a major falling out. It might be something that happened and was never fully addressed. A misunderstanding that was never resolved. A period where things between you were not easy or warm or simple. And because of that history, you might not immediately count this person among your defenders. You might even have assumed that their feelings about you were neutral at best. They defended you the most powerfully of the three. When the conversation started piling up, when the narrative was gaining momentum and the person talking seemed to be landing with some of the room, this third person stopped it. Not with a measured response, with visible disgust. Spirit showed me the expression on this person's face, and I know that sounds like a strange thing to see in a reading, but sometimes that is exactly how Spirit communicates. And what was on their face when they heard what was being said about you was not just disagreement. It was a kind of moral offense. The specific disgust that comes from watching someone say something they know is being said with a manipulative intent. This person could see it. They could see what was actually happening underneath the content of what was being said. They could see the mechanics of the attack. And they were not going to sit there and let it happen. What they said was something in the direction of, I do not always see eye to eye with this person, and we have had our issues, but I know who they are, and this is not who they are. And I want you to really sit with the weight of that for a second. Because that statement, coming from someone without an obvious loyalty motive, coming from someone who has their own complicated history with you, coming from someone whose defense could not easily be dismissed as just protecting a friend, that statement landed in a completely different way than if it had only come from the first two people. It carried a specific credibility that comes from detachment, from the fact that this person had no obvious stake in defending you. They just could not sit there and watch something dishonest happen to someone they actually knew. The room after those three people spoke was different from the room before. Something had shifted. The person doing the talking had lost the clean air they needed for the narrative to breathe and spread. And some of the people who had been listening found themselves in a more complicated internal position than they had expected to be in when that conversation started. Now, I need to talk about who started this. Who it was that said what they said. Because Spirit gave me a clear picture of their energy and their actual motivation, and I think understanding it is going to help you process this in a way that is healthier than the alternative of just feeling hurt and confused about why someone would do this. This person is not operating from a place of genuine grievance. I want to be very clear about that, because I think one of the things we do when we find out someone has been saying things about us is we try to find the legitimate version of their complaint. We try to figure out what we did wrong or what we could have done differently, because somehow that feels better than the alternative, which is that someone attacked you without a real basis for it. But Spirit is showing me clearly that what happened here was not a real grievance expressed in an unhealthy way. What happened was something that originated in this person's internal experience of themselves and their own life, and has very little to do with you in any honest sense. This person feels something when they think about you or when they are in the same space as you. Not fondness, something more complicated and more uncomfortable than that. There is something about your existence, about who you are, about the way you move through the world, about what you represent or what you are achieving, or simply about your energy that activates something in them that is unpleasant for them to sit with. And rather than doing the internal work of figuring out where that discomfort is actually coming from, rather than being honest with themselves about what it is that you trigger in them, they chose the easier path, which was to try to change how other people see you. Because if they can make you smaller in the minds of the people around them, if they can create some distance between your reputation and your reality in the eyes of others, then the uncomfortable thing your existence activates in them becomes slightly less visible, slightly less sharp, slightly more manageable. That is insecurity doing what insecurity does when it is not being examined honestly. It deflects outward. It constructs a problem with someone else to avoid sitting with the real problem, which is internal. And it picks targets very specifically. It does not attack people randomly. It attacks the people whose presence makes the insecurity most visible, which tells you something very significant about what your existence is doing to this person just by you simply being who you are. I want to talk about you now and what Spirit showed me about your actual energy, because it is the key to understanding why this happened and why those 3 people responded the way they did, and why the person who started this felt the need to do it in the first place. Because all of it is connected back to something very specific about who you are. You are real, not in a simple, obvious sense, in the deep sense. In the sense that the version of you that people encounter is not carefully curated for maximum social approval. You are not running a performance. You are not managing the impression you make by presenting a strategic, edited version of yourself and keeping the rest carefully hidden. You just show up as you are, with the warmth and the opinions and the edges and the specific way you think about things that is yours and only yours. And you let people receive that however they receive it, without doing the exhausting, invisible work of adjusting yourself in real time based on whether they seem to be approving. That quality is rarer than most people realize, genuinely rarer, because most social interaction, especially in the environments where we spend most of our time, operates on a low level of performance from everyone involved. People are presenting versions of themselves, managing gaps, keeping certain things back. And when someone shows up in that environment who is not doing any of that, who is just actually there, actually themselves, actually consistent between what is on the surface and what is underneath it, creates a very specific response in different types of people. For people who are grounded in themselves, it is incredibly refreshing. It feels like being able to exhale. Being around you does not require the same low-level vigilance that being around performers does, because there is nothing to decode. What you see is what is there. And that builds a very particular kind of trust and a very particular kind of bond over time, because every interaction confirms the same thing: you are who you said you were. You are who you were last time. You are consistent. And consistent people in an inconsistent world become very precious to the people who can recognize them. But for people who are managing a performance for people who have built their social position or their self-image on a particular curated version of themselves, your realness is uncomfortable. Not because you do anything to make it uncomfortable. Just because your existence in comparison highlights the gap between who they present themselves as and who they actually are. You are like a mirror that they did not ask to look in. And some people respond to that by trying to crack the mirror. If they can introduce doubt about your credibility, if they can make people wonder about your character or your intentions or your accuracy as a person, then the reflection becomes less clear and they can go back to managing their presentation without feeling quite so exposed. That is what you are dealing with. That is the actual dynamic underneath what was said about you. And once you see it, that clearly it becomes much easier to hold it at the right emotional distance. This was not about you. It was never about you. It was about what your existence activates in someone who has not done the work of understanding themselves. Let me talk about what is happening karmically right now because Spirit was very specific about this and it is significant. You are in a season of profound realignment. Things that have been out of alignment in your world relationships built on misunderstanding. Social positions built on incomplete pictures. Situations that had foundations that were not entirely honest, all of those things are being corrected. And correction does not always look gentle from the inside of it. Sometimes it looks like conflict. Sometimes it looks like people revealing their actual character in ways that are disappointing or jarring. Sometimes it looks like a sudden clarity about who is actually in your corner versus who was maintaining a performance of being in your corner. But every single piece of the correction is moving you towards something more accurate, more real, more genuinely aligned with who you actually are and where you are actually going. And the conversation that happened, the things that were said about you, and the 3 people who refused to let those things stand is part of that correction. It is clarifying the landscape. It is making visible things that were previously just quietly present in the background. And that visibility, even though it is uncomfortable, is actually serving you. The spiritual protection around you in this season is remarkable, and Spirit wants you to know it is not accidental. Your ancestors are active. Your guides are working. There is a real energetic buffer around your reputation and your relationships that goes beyond just having good people around you. The fact that 3 people in that specific room had the specific knowledge and the specific instinct and the specific courage to push back is not random. They were moved to do what they did. Something worked through them. Something that exists in your spiritual field organized itself in that room and expressed itself through those 3 people and their willingness to speak. You are held by more than you can see. I want you to really receive that statement rather than just hearing it. You are held by more than you can see. And what is holding you does not require you to be in the room for it to work on your behalf. Now, let me get into the practical dimension of this because I think it is important to be genuinely useful here rather than just validating your feelings and sending you on your way feeling confirmed, but without any real direction. What should you not do in the immediate aftermath of this? Do not confront the person who said what they said reactively. Not because you do not have every right to address this. You do. But reactive confrontation in the immediate aftermath of this kind of thing tends to pull you into a dynamic on terms that were set by someone else, and it uses energy that is genuinely better directed elsewhere right now. If there is ever a time for a direct conversation with this person, and there may be, it should be on your terms and on your timeline and from a place of being fully settled rather than from a place of fresh hurt. Do not go around to the people who were in that room trying to correct the record individually. I know the instinct is to make sure people have the right information. But your behavior and your character correct the record more effectively than anything you could say right now. And approaching people about it can land in ways you do not intend, even when your intention is completely clean. Do not shrink. This is the most important one. When we know our name has been in someone's mouth in the wrong way, our instinct is often to pull back, to become less visible, to take up less space, because some part of us is trying to reduce the surface area for attack. Resist that with everything in you. Shrinking does not protect you. It gives the narrative room to breathe without being contradicted by your actual presence. The best thing you can do is keep showing up. Keep being visible. Keep taking up exactly the space you were always supposed to take up. What should you do? Keep being yourself with the same consistency you have always brought. Every interaction that the people from that room have with you going forward is going to either confirm or contradict what they heard. If you keep being who you are, the real consistent version, you are going to be a walking contradiction of the narrative they were sold. And that contradiction compounds over time. It gets harder and harder to hold a false picture of someone whose actual behavior keeps showing you something different. Let yourself receive the support that is already there. Those 3 people did what they did without you asking them to and without expectation of acknowledgement. But you are allowed to know about it. You are allowed to let that knowledge be something that sits warmly in your chest rather than just filing it away as information. People showed up for you. Real people with real stakes in the situation chose to put themselves in the position of disagreeing with a narrative when they could have just stayed quiet. Let that mean something. And finally, hand over what you cannot control. The parts of this that are outside your direct influence. The people who might believe what was said, at least partially. The process of truth making its way back to the surface in the minds of people who were in that room. The timeline of how all of this resolves and clears. Hand those parts over, not passively. Not with resignation. With the specific trust that comes from knowing that what was shown to me at midnight 2 nights ago is real, that you are defended, that you are protected, that the truth about who you are has multiple witnesses and multiple advocates, and that the person who tried to rewrite your story in that room fundamentally misjudged what they were dealing with. Final messages now. Spirit gave me 8 of them, and they are all specific, and I am delivering every single one. First, the narrative is already losing momentum. The cracks that those 3 defenders created in that conversation are widening with every day that passes. The seed of doubt about the source's credibility is already growing in the minds of some of the people who were in that room. Truth has a very specific way of making itself felt even before it is fully spoken, and it is working right now in the spaces you cannot see. Second, the person who said what they said is going to have to reckon with the fact that it did not land the way they intended. They went in expecting the room to move with them. The room did not move with them. And that specific failure, public, visible in front of people whose opinion matters to them, is going to sit with them. They're going to have to carry that. And it is going to inform how they approach you going forward, whether they are conscious of it or not. Third, your character is being witnessed in rooms you are not in. This is one of the most significant things that came through in this reading. The real version of you is present and speaking even when you are not there to represent yourself. The impressions people have built from actual time with you, actual interactions with you, actual observation of how you show up, those are doing the work of defending you continuously and without your involvement. That is the long-term payoff of living consistently, of being the same person in every context, of not performing. You built something real over time, and it is working for you right now in ways you cannot fully see. 4-3 is not a coincidence. Spiritually, 3 is a number of completion and confirmation. 3 voices, 3 different relationships, 3 different bases for the defense, 3 different kinds of credibility. The universe chose this with intention. Not just to help you in the immediate social situation, but to show you something about yourself that you need to update internally. You are more known, more valued, more defended than the version of yourself you sometimes carry in your own mind. Let this update that picture. 5th, your ancestors are active in this specific situation. The protection around your reputation is spiritually organized. Those 3 people being in that room, having the knowledge they had, being moved to speak in the way they spoke that had a divine component. Something worked through them on your behalf. You are not navigating this alone, even in the moments when it feels most solitary. 6th, nothing that was said in that conversation can block what is meant for you. The opportunities coming, the connections building, the growth that is in motion in your life, none of it is contingent on every person having an accurate picture of you. What is calibrated for you is calibrated for who you actually are. And who you actually are is continuing to be visible and confirmed by the people who are actually paying attention. 7th, the people who belong in your next chapter are beginning to see you more clearly. The recalibration happening right now is not only removing what does not belong. It is also bringing into sharper focus what does. The right people, the people who are going to be part of what is actually being built in your life, are in a process of seeing you accurately. Some of them are already in your orbit. Some of them are on their way. And the version of you they are going to encounter is going to be the real one. Because the real one is the only one you have ever actually been. 8th and final message. The one Spirit would not let me close without, and the one I have been building toward this entire reading. Stop carrying this alone. The weight of knowing your name is in the wrong kind of conversation somewhere. The weight of not having the full picture of everything that was said or who believes it or what the fallout is going to look like. The weight of feeling like you have to manage something you did not create and do not deserve. You are defended. You are protected. You are known by people who matter and who showed up without being asked. And the universe is handling what you cannot see and what is not yours to handle directly. 3 people stood up in a room without you asking them to. 3 people looked at a false version of you and said no. That is not this person. 3 people chose truth over comfort, chose to be visible in their disagreement, chose to put themselves in a position of opposing a narrative when it would have been much easier to simply stay quiet. If 3 people showed up for you like that, in a room you were not even in, imagine what is showing up for you in the parts of this you cannot see at all. Stay consistent. Stay real. Stay exactly who you are. Because who you are is the thing that made 3 people stand up for you without being asked. And it is the thing that is going to keep making people stand up for you in every room. In every conversation, in every moment where someone tries to present a smaller version of your story to an audience. The truth about you is too consistent and too witnessed to be undone by one person in one conversation. It has too many defenders, including the universe itself. And that was confirmed to me at midnight 2 nights ago in the dark in my apartment with my cards and my notebook and a pen that was running out of ink by the end. You are more held than you know. Keep going.